welcome. I'm Jess, for those of you that don't know me. I am new to our team. I'm our client success manager. So it's nice to see you guys again, or for the first time. And this is Cameron. He's going to be helping us today, leading our Truth Behind the Plate event. A little bit about Cameron. He's a California native who relocated to Arizona 7 years ago. He has 26 years of culinary experience under his belt, including a degree in culinary arts from the very prestigious Scottsdale Culinary Institute. Cameron has worked alongside some of the industry's top chefs and earned 2 Golden Foodie Award nominations through his career. He opened 2 True Food Kitchen locations and later Farm and Craft, which he managed for 3 years. His interest in healthy food inspired him to step out of his comfort zone and look at food from a totally different perspective. For close to 3 years now, Cameron has been operating as a produce wholesaler and distributor to restaurants, working closely with farms and packing houses to ensure the freshest ingredients are delivered. This experience has opened his eyes even more to the struggles we face in the American food system, from deceptive marketing to food insecurity, waste, and nutrient value. Recognizing the need for change, Cameron recently launched his passion project, 9 Herbs Kitchen, a healthy food truck that uses locally sourced, organic, nutrient-dense food. 9 Herbs Kitchen isn't just about serving people healthy food, it's about educating them on the importance of what they eat, where it comes from, and how it's made. Cameron is committed to ensuring that everyone has access to healthy food and operates a zero food waste operation, donating unsold food to Feed Phoenix and turning any remaining scraps into compost. Cameron aims to set an example of what the industry should be and show that it's possible to have a sustainable food system. So before we get started, if you guys have any questions off the bat of things that you want Cameron to cover, now would be the time to do that. But if not, I'm going to give it to Cameron.
Hi everybody. So I've been in the food industry for a long time, and I kind of get to see both sides of the food industry, from the restaurant standpoint and then from the wholesale standpoint. The wholesale standpoint is a lot different and a lot more eye-opening than the restaurant standpoint, because you get to see a lot of the stuff that you don't really see in restaurants. So it kind of made me dive deeper into that and just kind of, explore the food industry. So in the talk, I'm going to cover a bunch of stuff. I'm going to kind of go through this pretty quickly just because it is a lot of information, but I will send this out to all of you guys so that you have this information. There's lots of links and websites and stuff in here, as well as like a list of documentaries that you guys can check out and dive deeper. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So our food, we're going to talk about what's in our food, how is it produced, nutrient properties, where does the food come from, and where does our food go. So first, what's in our food? Conventional versus organic, pesticides and chemicals, and growth hormones and antibiotics. Conventional food farming. So conventional farming is the most widely used form of farming in the United States. It uses tons of pesticides, tons of chemicals, in order to mitigate bugs, pests, fungi, or funguses, and stuff from taking over the crop. In turn, you guys are eating that stuff too. So there's lots of pesticides in food, lots of fungicides, herbicides, things like that, and you guys ingest that because it's all over the food. It's also based on monocrop culture, which means they, instead of growing multiple things in one area, they're growing one thing. So only corn in the field, only soy in the field. That is not really good for soil health. Soil health is probably the most important thing in farming that we can do to make our food better for us. And with conventional farming, that's just not possible. They plow their fields every year, multiple times. That leads to soil erosion, that leads to less nutrients in the soil, so then they're having to put synthetic nutrients back into the soil in order for the food to grow. There's also 3 major companies that control all farming in the United States. That is Corteva Agriscience, Bayer Corporation, and Syngenta. Those 3 companies control 85% of the food that's produced in the United States, which is, in my opinion, not a very good thing. You give that control to everybody, or to those 3 people, you're kind of left with no options, which is not good. Bayer Corporation wasn't involved in agriculture until just recently. They bought a company called Monsanto. Monsanto is the biggest seed producer in the United States. They're also the biggest pesticide producer in the United States. There's a lot of controversy with them right now with Roundup and glyphosate and stuff like that, and it's not good stuff. Glyphosate was originally made to be a weapon of war, so having that sprayed on our food, it's not good. Yeah. So next, organic farming. So organic farming is definitely a better option, but it's not perfect. So organic farming, I guess I'll just ask, what do you guys think of when you hear organic farming?
No pesticides.
Okay.
Bat guano.
Huh?
Bat guano.
Okay.
Sea salt.
Yeah, so the image of organic farming is supposed to be that there's no pesticides, no chemicals, no synthetics, and stuff like that. That, in theory, is supposed to be true, but it's not. So there is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture called the NOP, which is National Organics Program, and they set the rules and regulations for organic farming here in the United States. They have a list that they put out every year of allowable and not allowable substances for organic farming. The allowable synthetic substances is 7 pages long. So 7 pages of stuff that's allowed in organic farming. Things like bleach. There's, the list is pretty extensive. I've actually put a link to the list on here, and you guys can take a look at it. It's pretty eye-opening, and it's pretty scary. Not to mention, so if something's grown organically, let's say in Mexico, and it's coming up here to the United States, 1 in every 3 trucks that's coming in from Mexico gets gassed before it comes here. So at the border, they will gas it with pesticides to ensure that there's nothing inside of it that can be brought up here and spread through our agriculture system. Meaning that's not really organic because it's being gassed with pesticides. And the scary part is you never know which trucks are gassed, which ones aren't. They could be conventional, they could be organic. I don't know if you guys ever, when you get tomatoes from the grocery store and it feels like it has like an oily substance on it, that means it's gassed. The other part of it is like when you wash vegetables, everybody washes their produce and stuff. If you're washing it with just water, it's not gonna come off because most pesticides are oil-based. So oil, water, just kind of rejects it and it's gonna stay on there. I recommend putting a little bit of vinegar inside of your wash solution and washing it because the oil will cut through the vinegar will cut through the oil. Yeah, so next, regenerative farming. This is the absolute best farming practice. This needs to be more widely used. So regenerative farming is basically farming the way nature intended it to be, mixed crops, focusing on soil health rather than on the plant. If your soil's healthy, your plants are gonna be healthy. That's just what it is. It's nature. That's how it's gonna like help the process of growing. Biodiversity is huge. So it's, an example is having produce grow, multiple different kinds of produce, having chickens, cows, goats, everything on the same farm. All of those things kind of work together naturally, and they help. There's no tilling, there's no chemicals. Basically, the crops are what's fertilizing itself. You can plant wildflowers out there, which act as pest deterrents. You can plant clover in the middle of it, which helps fix the nitrogen in the soil. It's just the most natural way of farming, and all around the best. There is a big push to switch to this type of farming here in the United States, but it needs to be bigger. Regenerative farming can not only help with our food, it can help with a lot of other things, climate change, climate control, things like that. So plants naturally pull carbon out of the air, pull it into the soil, and dispose of it. Regenerative farming is probably the only way that that is possible to do. There are some studies that say that we can turn around this whole climate crisis just by switching our way of farming within 15 years, which is pretty crazy. That all we have to do is change the way that we farm. A lot of people who say that that organic or regenerative farming isn't sustainable and we can't grow enough food to supply the world, I think that that's a load of crap. It is possible. Well, I'll get into that in another slide, but we waste a lot of food here in the United States and worldwide, and so to say that we can't produce enough but we're wasting as much as we are just kind of doesn't make sense. Okay, next, pesticides and chemicals in our food. So these are some of the main pesticides, chemicals, and stuff that you find in your food. MSG, artificial food colorings, BPAs, nitrates, nitrites, perchlorate, sodium hypochlorite, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, glyphosate, and DDT. DDT was banned in the use of farming 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Nasty stuff, but it was, in normal practice and FDA approved and USDA approved, and I mean, it was some nasty stuff. Glyphosate, I think, is on its way to being banned. It causes cancer, it causes tumors, all sorts of just crap, and that's what Roundup is. MSG, there's a lot of controversy on MSG, on whether it's good for you or bad for you. It does occur naturally in stuff, but what people are using to season their food is not a natural version of MSG. Sodium hypochlorite is just concentrated bleach, and that's widely used, especially in water treatment for farming. Artificial food coloring here in the United States, there's 7 different colors that are banned in most other modern countries, which is kind of a telling thing, that here in the United States it's okay, but France, Germany, Russia, things like that, they're like, no, you can't have this stuff. So it's like, well, why? I think that there needs to be more emphasis on that. I mean, people need to stand up and start fighting and saying like, hey, this isn't okay, and we need to change the way our food is. Hormones. So in cattle raising, chickens, pretty much any animal, a lot of stuff that's conventional will have estrogens, testosterones, and steroids added into them in order to make them grow faster, so that we can produce more in a quicker amount of time. These things lead to breast cancer, early puberty in kids, reproductive problems, hormone imbalances, prostate cancer, heart conditions, and skin problems. If you're pumping the animals full of estrogen or testosterone, we're getting that too. I haven't confirmed the study, but they said, I read one the other day that said that puberty is onsetting an average of 6 years earlier than it was in the 70s, which is kind of crazy. It's a lot. it shouldn't be happening. It's all basically for profit, and that's kind of shitty that we have to sacrifice our health for their profit. Yeah. Okay, antibiotics. This is another controversial one. So a lot of farmers use antibiotics in their animals to prevent them from getting viruses, diseases, and stuff like that. In turn, we're intaking that. It also, when you keep on giving antibiotics to animals and stuff, the viruses and the bacteria are going to just grow stronger, and they're going to become immune to that. There are natural ways for animals to get antibiotics, and it's through food. If you put moldy bread inside of pig feed, they're naturally going to be getting penicillin out of that, and it's going to keep the viruses away, and it's a more natural version of it. Whereas if you're putting synthetic antibiotics in there, it's just going to be a perpetual thing where the viruses are going to be able to become immune to that. My belief is that we don't need the antibiotics. We can get everything that we need through food. Probiotics and prebiotics are both things that can help with that and help regulate our immune systems. Also, if we're feeding or eating and feeding to our animals more nutrient-dense food, they have a lot less risk of becoming ill and having viruses and stuff like that affect them. That's just my thoughts on it. So this is a big one, nutrient and mineral depletion. So the moment something is harvested or killed, it starts losing its nutrients, right? So if you are buying something that in the grocery store, let's say, you're buying your lettuce. Your lettuce, if you're buying it in the grocery store, is minimum 7 to 8 days out of the field. For instance, spinach, after day 3 of being harvested, you've lost 70% of its nutrient value. If it's 7 days, you pretty much have nothing left. I was telling Aaron the other day that the average, or what's the average age of an apple in the grocery store?
Probably 6 months.
1 year.
Oh.
1 year old. 1 year from harvest. That is insane. There is 0 nutrient value left in that thing. It is, I mean, it's awful. Potatoes, onions, same thing. Potatoes and onions are very seasonal, contrary to what people think. And what they'll do is they'll harvest them and then they stick them in a root cellar. And then that's what they use to be able to sell throughout the year. But if you're getting an onion or a potato that's 5 months old, you really have no nutrient properties left in it. I think this is the number one thing that causes people to be, or number one contributor to our health here in the United States is the fact that we're not getting the nutrients out of the food. Conventional farming, there is like minimal nutrient value in conventional produce, and that is bad. And that's because they're using synthetic nutrients and synthetic pesticides, synthetic chemicals in growing it. So there already isn't a lot of nutrient value in it, and then come 4, 5, 6, 7 days out of the field, you're left with nothing. I think that the biggest yes.
What about frozen produce then?
That's another thing that messes with nutrient and mineral depletion is how it's stored. So freezing it, not good. But you can preserve food and it will keep its nutrient value. Fermenting foods, jarring and canning food, those things can help preserve nutrient value. Also how you cook the food.
That's exactly
that goes.
Okay, yes. So how you cook the food. If you're cooking something like spinach at a really super high temperature, sauteing it, I mean, you're also depleting the minerals out of it. I think that the less amount of time something is spent cooking, the better. But honestly, the best, and I know it sounds shitty, especially me being a chef, the best way to cook food is steaming it, and lightly steaming it, or eating it raw. And that's just, I think that most people need to be eating about 50% raw in order to be getting a lot of the nutrients and stuff that they need. Okay, where does our food come from? This kind of ties into the nutrient depletion. So imports are stuff that come from outside of the United States. Obviously, this is the longest, the food that will have the most time out of the fields or out since being processed. It's also costs more because transportation and storage, not to mention waste, because, okay, so it's harvested, there's some waste there. Then it's packaged, there's some waste there because, you know, as you're packaging, it's you're finding stuff that doesn't look as beautiful. Then you're shipping it. Once it gets to where it's going, it's being ran through again to see whether some of it was lost. Okay, so there's more waste. Then it's going to the grocery store and they're sorting through it as they're putting it on the shelves. There's more waste, there's more loss. I would say 100% stay away from imported foods. It's just not good. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the economy. It's not good for you. You're losing a lot of minerals and nutrients in that time of transportation. Domestic is the next. That one's okay, but still not great. Domestic is anything grown or raised in the United States. So if you're getting, you know, oranges from Florida over here in Arizona, that's quite a bit of travel time. You're still not getting the best. It is slightly better, less expensive, less time out of the fields, less carbon emissions, stuff like that, but it's still not great. And then the best obviously is local. Find local farmers, find local farmers markets and stuff like that. And that's really who, you know, that's where your best bang for your buck is gonna go, or come from. It's less expensive overall, less time traveled, less carbon emissions, and you're supporting somebody who's right there in your community. Okay, so how it's raised. I use chickens as an example just because chickens is kind of the most obvious. So there's caged chickens, there's cage-free chickens, and then there's pasture-raised chickens. Okay, so caged, obviously, they're cooped up in a cage. They never go outside. They never see the daylight. They're cramped and pumped full of antibiotics and hormones and all sorts of crap. Cage-free, I know everybody thinks sounds better, but really it's not, because that just means they're not in a cage. So they're still held captive inside of a big giant room. They can just roam around and trample over each other inside of that room. I personally think cage-free is worse than caged, just because they typically are a lot dirtier facilities. It's just not pretty. They don't go outside ever, and once again, lots of antibiotics and lots of hormones. Pasture raised, always, I would say, if you're gonna eat eggs or eat chicken or turkey or duck or whatever, pasture raised is the way to go. They are free to roam inside and outside as much as they want. They eat naturally. They're not given like chicken feed. They'll eat grass and food scraps and stuff like that, and that's honestly the best thing for them. I know everybody here has heard about the whole egg situation that happened a few months ago. So a lot of that had to do with what they were being fed. I know a lot of news sources said that there was bird flu and this and that. I know a lot of chicken farmers, and I know a lot of chicken farmers who all of a sudden were just not being able to produce eggs, and they were all using the same feed from before, and there was a chicken farmer who said, hey, it's your guys' feed. Like, switch your feed and your eggs, or your chickens will start producing eggs. Two of the people that I know switched their feed to a natural feed, which is just giving them vegetable scraps, and their chickens started laying eggs immediately right afterwards. Yeah, I would just, I think it's important to have those relationships with people locally here in your community, so that you know what's going into the food and how it's being raised and stuff like that. You can't call Foster Farms and say, hey, how are you guys raising your chickens? You know, you can go to Two Wash Ranch and take a tour of their facility and say, hey, you know, like, I want the tour, I want to know what's in these chickens, I want to see how they're living, and they have no problem doing that. They are a great farm out here for chickens and ducks. I support them wholeheartedly. They do things the right way, and they don't give their animals any synthetics or anything like that. Okay, so where does your food go? So 40% of the food produced in the United States goes to the landfill. That is insane. 40%. That is the equivalent of 20 pounds per person per month in the United States going to the dump. But they say that we have to farm conventionally in order to produce enough food for us. Well, obviously that's bullshit, because 40% is going to the dump. 40% of our food is going to the landfill, and there's still people starving on the streets. 40% of our food goes to the landfill, and we can't get food from a field to your kitchen in less than 7 days. That's crap. Yes?
No, is that 40%, do you know the breakdown between like households and restaurants?
Yeah. So restaurants, okay, so when you talk about food waste, I mean, that 40% encompasses everything. So that 40% encompasses when the farmers are harvesting crops and there's stuff that's blemished or messed up. That 40% includes transportation and loss. That 40% includes restaurants, includes people throwing away their food scraps, everything. The number one contributor to that is the consumer, and that is really shitty. But here in the US, we've been taught that tomatoes need to be perfect, round, and red. That's bullshit. Tomatoes were never supposed to be that, and they are supposed to be misshapen and stuff like that. Carrots aren't supposed to be fully straight and no roots on them. We've been conditioned to think that our food is supposed to look a certain way. I've worked in some of the best restaurants in the United States, and I've worked for many chefs that if, you know, their bell peppers weren't perfect squares, they'd send them back and reject them and things like that. And it's like, you shouldn't do that, you know? Also seasonality. If you're eating tomatoes out of season, they're not gonna be the best quality. And when they're not the best quality, you're wasting more. So the biggest things that we can do as consumers is eat locally, eat seasonally. That's it, it's that simple. You shouldn't be eating salmon 365 days out of the year. Salmon is seasonal. Tomatoes are seasonal, avocados are seasonal. Everything pretty much is seasonal. And that is probably one of the biggest things that you can do to mitigate food waste and to help your health is eating seasonally and eating locally. Go to the farmers markets here and talk to the farmers and the people who are selling the food. They'll point you in the right direction. Uptown Farmers Market is just a few blocks away from here. Downtown Farmers Market's just a few blocks away from here. They're both really good farmers markets. They both have a lot of people who are doing things the right way and who are trying to fight the system. But with that, a lot of people are fighting them also. So Blue Sky Farm Organics is a big organics farm out here. They're out in Glendale. They had their farm cut in half 3 years ago because the city basically killed their lease and said, we're selling this property out from under you, and so they cut half of their farm just overnight. Just bye, there goes half of your farm. They spent 12 years developing that soil for that farm, and overnight the city just said, we're gonna build a high rise there. Like, how shitty is that? But if there aren't people there supporting little farms like that and fighting back and going to the town hall meetings and telling them like, no, we shouldn't have this high rise, like this farm is more important than a high rise, then it's just gonna, those farms are just gonna keep getting trampled over by, the bigger entities. Sorry, digressed a little. Back to food waste. So the other things that you guys can do to mitigate food waste is take your food scraps and compost them. Or if you don't want to compost them yourselves, there are companies out here that will do it for you. Recycle City is awesome. They will come to your house once a week, drop off a 5-gallon bucket, you put all your food waste in there, food scraps in there, keep the lid on it, and once a week they're gonna come pick it up and they're gonna drop off a new bucket to you. They in turn turn that stuff into compost and they give it to their farm, they use it on their farm, they give it to other organizations out here that are nonprofits that have a focus on food and farming, and then they sell it to other farms in order to keep their program going. They're a great organization. On the residential side, they're really easy to get a hold of. On the commercial side, they're not, because they're overloaded on the commercial side of it for restaurants, but for residential, it's that simple. They literally will just come by, drop off buckets, and you just leave it out there for them. So buying local reduces waste, reduces transportation.
Hey Cameron, your slides aren't updating on the screen.
Uh-oh.
The city of Phoenix has a really good program too, where you pay extra for your dumpster and you put all your green waste in.
I don't know why it's
It's not that much extra.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right, well, I'm just gonna read because I can't figure it out. I'm not a tech savvy person. So buying locally reduces waste. Reduce transportation when your food is produced locally. It needs to travel less distance, which in turn reduces emissions associated with the transportation to help reduce the amount of food waste that occurs. Fresher food. So when you buy locally, your food's fresher. You're getting more nutrients. Yeah.
I have a question on,
Yes.
are there any grocery stores that offer local produce besides just the farmers markets?
Yes and no.
Like Whole Foods, maybe?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So Whole Foods is technically supposed to sell a certain percentage of their products local. Whole Foods will buy 5 cases of local zucchini, even though they know they need 10, and then they'll just supplement the rest with whatever they can get. I would say for as big of a company as Whole Foods is, they do a pretty good job, but they're owned by Amazon, so
Did not know that.
yeah.
That's why they have Amazon boxes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Do you have links in this for Like
Yes.
local delivery of organic, local.
Yes.
Yeah, like the food boxes and
Yep,
stuff like that. Yeah.
100%.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. Some local organizations and stuff that do farming and teach farming and are really trying to push to bring farming back to what it should be. And they do CSA boxes, so you just pay a weekly thing and they send you a box of produce every week. Good stuff. Also, you know, being able to go to the farmers markets, they'll have box pickups there. They'll have delivery, things like that. Buying locally also helps with supply chain issues. So if, you know, there's train crashes that are happening everywhere and food's not able to get from Ohio to here, when you're buying locally, you don't have to worry about that because it's right here, it's here in your community. You know, when COVID happened, COVID really rocked the restaurant industry and the food industry as a whole. Like, I mean, the industry that was supposed to be untouchable was just destroyed. I don't necessarily think that it was a bad thing. I think that there needed to be a lot of change in the food industry. And I think that COVID brought a lot of that to light. But I also think it showed a lot of our systemic problems as far as like distribution and things like that. It showed a lot of holes in our system. When we're importing most of our stuff from overseas and all of a sudden everything stops, we're kind of screwed. So yeah, local food. Local food helps that. And then also supporting local helps keep the local economy stimulated. When you buy something from, let's say, Walmart, you know, you spend $100 at Walmart, only $25 of that $100 is staying in the local economy. When you spend $100 with a local farmer, like 70 to 75% of that is staying in the local economy. It creates jobs, it just helps locally all around, a lot more than, you know, giving your money to Walmart or Fry's, Bash's, whatever. I know Bash's is technically here, but so my vision for a sustainable food future. Regenerative farming is number one. Close relationships and knowledge of growing practices, seasonality of food, less food miles equals less time out of the fields equals more nutrient value. We're insulated from supply chain disruptions and global food safety concerns. That's another one. So if, you know, most of our lettuce is coming from Salinas, California in certain parts of the year, they get an E. coli breakout out in their field. Half of the United States now has no access to lettuce because they had an E. coli breakout. Well, if you're buying it locally, you know, there's more people and more farms growing locally means you have more options. Also, the smaller a farm is, the less likely things like that are gonna fall through the cracks and gonna happen. There's just more eyes on it than these huge giant conglomerate farms. And then less carbon emissions from transportation, less food waste, and it boosts the local economy. What we can do to help. Put your focus on buying food locally, farmers markets and local purveyors such as butchers and bakers. Seek out organizations that grow food locally and provide assistance to people that need. Project Roots is an amazing organization. They're somebody I'm partnering with. They build community gardens. They build gardens and farms at schools, and they educate the children. I think that is the biggest thing that we can do to help the food economy is educate our children about food and get them involved in farming and interested in it, because when you see a kid's face when he plants a seed and grows his first tomato, like I mean, it's amazing. Like, and that spark will help. It will help push further these younger generations into focusing on this stuff. So Project Roots does that. That's what they do. They teach children, and they go to food insecure cities and areas and teach people about how to grow their own food. Tiger Mountain Foundation is another great organization. They do community gardens, and they help at-risk youth and people who are just getting out of prison and teach them skills on cooking and growing food, to just try and give them a second chance and a second opportunity at things, and show them that there is you can learn a lot from food, and you can change your perspective on life through food. I think that those two organizations are great organizations out here. Rules and regulations, pay attention to those things. Everybody, when, you know, election time goes around, everybody's putting their focus on the president and, you know, the higher up positions. Those aren't the things that I think people need to be focusing on. I think they need to be focusing more on locality, and the rules that are gonna affect you and affect your community. Those are where you can make big change, and finding out what bills are out there that support your local community. I think that if more people paid attention to it, less bullshit would happen in the industry. I don't think that it's okay that 3 companies own 85% of the seed. If you control the seed, you control the people, and that's not
I'm really
good.
surprised that's even allowed, because
Yeah, it's a monopoly.
They do it when it comes
Yeah.
to telecommunications and other things, so why would they
Yeah,
not do that for food sources?
Yeah.
They're
and
all chemical companies.
yeah, chemical companies and
They're all
pharmaceutical
free.
companies,
Yeah.
and that's scary. Like, I mean, I don't want to be all conspiracy theorist, but why does a pharmaceutical company need to control a third of the world's seed? It's not good. Yeah. And then the more nutrient dense your food is, the less you have to eat, and the less you have to eat. So what I mean by that is, the more nutrient dense your food is, you really don't have to eat as much food, because you're getting all of the nutrients that you need. Second part of that is, you're not going to end up paying for it with your health. You're not going to be ending up paying for it with the transportation costs and all of that, the packaging costs, the carbon emissions cost, all of those things. So it's not like having good, healthy local food isn't just about having the food. It kind of encompasses this whole ecosystem, and buying locally helps that ecosystem 100%. Yes.
Do you have information on how to, and where to buy local proteins like chicken,
Yep.
beef, and that?
100%.
Okay.
So if you're here in Phoenix area, there's 3 places that I recommend. One is the Arcadia Meat Market. Those guys do a great job sourcing all of their products. Number 2 is Nelson's Fish Market. They do a fantastic job sourcing. Okay, maybe 4 places. Chula Seafood, those guys are amazing. They really take the time to make sure that they are getting the best quality products out there. They do sell some farm raised stuff, but it is farm raised in a way that is sustainable. And then there's one more.
What was the second one?
Nelson's Meat or Fish Market.
I think they're an Indian store. Yeah, they're next to a great bar. Right.
Yeah. I can't think of the
There's
other
that
one.
meat
but
one down on like,
7th Avenue and
it's like Buckeye.
oh no.
Yeah, there's one down there too that's local. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and then Arizona grass-fed beef is fantastic, and they will ship directly to you. So you can order on their website, and they'll ship to you. Two Wash Ranch does chicken, turkey, duck. They're really, really good. All of those don't use antibiotics, hormones, anything like that. Arizona grass-fed beef is 100% fed, grass-finished. That's another deceptive marketing term is grass-fed beef. In order to be classified as grass-fed beef, it doesn't have to be fully grass-fed. It can just be grass-fed and then grain-finished. The reason farmers finish with grain is to get the cows fatter and grow bigger so that they get more yield out of their cows. Cows were never meant to eat grain. They are meant to eat grass. They are meant to graze and eat grass, and that's it. So that's what they should be eating. Grass-fed beef is a lot leaner, it's a lot healthier, it has a lot more nutrient value.
What about if it's pasture raised, then probably?
Yeah, most pasture-raised beef is
Yeah.
is eating grass. So yeah, I mean, I would just really kind of try and put your focus on seeing or finding like those local.
So what's the difference between commercial or conventional, I should say, and natural?
Natural is a bullshit word. So natural is just made, it's a marketing scheme. Natural doesn't mean anything. There's no certification to put natural on your packaging. There's no nothing. So when people put natural on there, you should probably stay away from it. Because it's just, it's a marketing scheme. There's no certified natural, there's no any of that. Non-GMO is another big one that's out there. There is certifications to be non-GMO, but technically a product can be genetically modified and still classified as non-GMO because it hasn't been genetically modified in a certain amount of time.
Everything genetically modified.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
how many of you guys eat broccoli?
Broccoli.
Do you know that broccoli is not a natural occurring vegetable? It was never. It doesn't exist in the wild. It doesn't exist. Yeah. Crazy, right? So yeah, broccoli was genetically modified to be broccoli. Corn, 90% of the corn produced in the United States is genetically modified. Monsanto actually has a patent on their corn seed, and it's not considered food, it's considered a pesticide because they've genetically modified it enough to where it resists pests, fungus, and weeds. Yes.
So if I buy some corn on the cob at a local farm, how do I know they're not using Monsanto seed?
Most local farmers are not going to use Monsanto seed because Monsanto has rules with their seed that you cannot replant. Meaning if you buy Monsanto tomatoes, you can't harvest the seeds from those tomatoes and replant those seeds. They put DNA markers inside of there so that they can come and test at your farm your tomatoes that you're growing, and if they find that you're growing last year's crops, they can seize your farm for a breach of contract. Yeah, it's really, they're, excuse my language, a really fucked up company.
Yeah.
I
They're,
realize how like political.
yeah, it's scary. There is a documentary called GMO OMG. I definitely recommend you watch it. It is going to anger you a lot. But I mean, they're a monopoly. They pump billions of dollars into political things for a reason, and it's kind of messed up because we're the ones who pay the price for that. There's many farmers who have had their farms seized by Monsanto because they've created their crops to be able to pollinate at farther distances, and so if you're a farmer who's growing organically and sustainably, and Monsanto's farm is, a couple of miles down the road, and somehow their crops pollinate with your crops, and they can test that DNA wise, they can take your farm because you don't have permission to be growing their crops, even though you're not growing their crops, but their pollen crossed with your plants. So you could literally lose your entire farm just because of nature occurring, which is crazy. There are rules that you're not supposed to be able to patent nature, and they've gone around that because they're genetically modifying everything, so it's not naturally occurring, so they're not patenting nature. They're just forcibly changing it, which is not good. Yeah. Okay, so my next couple of slides, which are not up there because I can't get it working. Steven's not over here. But I will send this out to you guys. It's just links to organizations. I don't know, bro. But it's just links to organizations you can get involved with, local farms that you can support, and documentaries that you guys can watch to dive deeper. And then also,
That was it. You had it. I saw it, you had it.
There it is.
sweet, yay. Cool. So local organizations that you can support are, so there's an organization out here called Locals First Arizona. They do all things small local businesses. So their biggest emphasis is just how do we uplift Arizona's small businesses. They also have this thing called the Arizona Good Food Finder, and it's a website of good food in Arizona, whether it's local farms, restaurants, things like that, farmers markets, bakeries, all sorts of stuff. It's a great little website that helps you be able to support local small businesses. Tiger Mountain Foundation I touched on before, Project Roots, and Recycled City. Waste Not Arizona, another important organization. So they do food rescue. So a restaurant that has food that's they're not going to be able to use or doesn't look the prettiest but it's still good, they can call Waste Not, and Waste Not will come and take that, and they will either prepare meals with it and give it to people who need it, or they will compost it. Good organization. The Coalition of Farmland Preservation. That is another really important organization that I think more people need to pay attention to and need to just get involved with, because they're the ones who are fighting to get farming back to what it should be. Local farms that you can support, Blue Sky Farm Organics, Crooked Sky Farms, Steadfast Farms, Mon-wed Farms. Arizona Warm Farm is great if you want to do your own garden at home. They sell compost, they sell warm castings, they sell all sorts of stuff. Good stuff. Spaces of Opportunity is an amazing, amazing place. It's in South Mountain, and it's 14-acre farm, and they subdivide it into little plots for people who want to get into the farming industry and who don't have the money to necessarily buy a huge piece of land. They can get their start at Spaces of Opportunity. They also have a couple of local little organizations that have farm plots there that they use as for educational purposes and for growing stuff that they can in turn sell to keep their organization going. Project Roots and Tiger Mountain Foundation both got their start from there. They've recently expanded, but they still have their plots there. But it is a really, really cool place. They do a farmer's market, I think, every Saturday. And you can literally go out there and see it being harvested as you're buying it. It's a cool little place. Uptown Farmers Market, which is of course over on Bethany and Central, and then Arizona Community Farmers Markets.com is pretty much every other farmers market that's in the valley. This is some links to some of the stuff that I talked about if you guys want to dive a little deeper. Everything that I kind of talked about is just surface level. It's not really really deep in there. But if you guys do want to go down that rabbit hole, these are some links that you can get. So the NOP list is the organics list that I was telling you guys about. I recommend taking a look at that. Yeah. And then these are some documentaries that I recommend watching. I would say Kiss the Ground is the newest one, and I think that that's probably one of the most important ones to watch. It's all about soil and regenerative farming. Woody Harrelson actually narrates it, and it's great. It talks about farming and the ins and outs of it, and really how big of an impact that just how things are grown will have on the world as a whole. GMO OMG will make you very mad, but it will also kind of open your eyes to some things. What the Health, that one is very controversial, but I would suggest watching it just so that you can see things from a different perspective. I do have a food truck. It is a vegan food truck. I'm not a proponent for people to 100% eat vegan, but I think that people need to eat more meals that are vegan. I don't think that you should have meat with every single meal. I just don't. It's not healthy. I think that you need to have balance. What the Health is a huge focus on plant-based, but it also opens your eyes a lot to how food really affects your health, and I think that's what is most important about that documentary. Fed Up is basically talking about the monopoly and the corruption in the food system. The food, agriculture, and chemical combined is like hundreds of billions of dollars a year industry. And anything that's that big of an industry, there's gonna be corruption, and there's gonna be politics and people getting paid and stuff like that. And that's just kind of an eye-opener into that. And then Broken Bread with Roy Choi. So Roy Choi is a chef. He started a food truck called the Kogi Truck. He's just a hood chef, like I was. I mean, just down and dirty chef. And he really wanted to take a deep dive into the food system and like why there's so much food insecurity in the United States, and he did. And so he basically made a series where he travels around to organizations that are trying to fight food insecurity and food poverty in the United States. He actually did an episode with one of my former chefs, Chef Bill Bracken. He runs an organization in California called Bracken's Kitchen. And he started a food truck that just drives around and feeds the homeless. You don't pay for any of the food. If you can't afford food, you go to the food truck and you get it. He gets all of that food from donations from restaurants, purveyors, stuff like that. He grew from doing like 1,000 meals a year to like now I think he's up to like almost 5 million meals a year, which is insane. That he just, so he's got a whole team now, a huge commercial kitchen, all done through donations. I think that's important. So that's it.
I have one more question.
What's up?
It goes back to the pesticides thing. You guys ever heard where like certain fruits or certain vegetables uptake more pesticides or like those
Yes,
things? Is that
the
an
Dirty
actual-
Dozen. Yes.
That's a real thing?
That is a real thing, and I forgot to link that actually in here, but I will send that out when I send this out. So there is the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are 12 fruits and vegetables that do absorb more pesticides than others, and typically it has to do with their water retention. Like celery is, it's like 90% water. Iceberg lettuce is like 90% water. Spinach is like 90% water. So if you're spraying pesticides on those, it's absorbing that because it's mostly made up of water.
What are the good ones? I don't.
I honestly don't remember them all off the top of my head, but they
Just
are.
The list it was just out this week, the new list.
They changed those lists
Yeah.
quite a bit.
You can Google it, it just came out. They added like green beans to it. or
Yeah.
something.
Tomatoes are always the worst usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. there's a lot of
Usually
things.
things-
Tomatoes are awful. So tomatoes, most of the time are harvested before they're ready to be harvested, and then they're gassed in order to force ripening, and then they're gassed in order to keep pests off of them. I mean, tomatoes are horrible.
Strawberries.
Strawberries are not good.
It's so sad.
And especially because strawberries have been like forced to be like year-round and staple, you know. Strawberries are super seasonal, and we were just talking about this. You know, you bite into a strawberry and it's all white on the inside. That's because it was picked before it was ready to be picked, and they force ripened it, and they're just not good. And also grown out of season. You know, they're not meant to be grown in the winter time, and they're grown in the winter. Yeah.
Gigantic size.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions?
I have one. How about homegrown citrus?
Homegrown citrus is great as long as you're not using pesticides and
About
stuff like that.
ortho plant fertilizer for it.
No,
Go with the natural.
go with the natural. And it's super, I mean, it's like, honestly, I don't want to say it like this, but it is. It's just as easy to get natural fertilizers out here as it is to get, you know, ortho or something like that. You can go to pretty much any nursery out here and they're gonna have a local composter or something like that out here. And you can go to farmers markets. For citrus, I recommend like getting some worm castings and stuff like that and just sprinkling that around there once a year and you're good. You can also, you can buy online like a pack of clover seeds. I think you can get like 1 pound of clover seeds for like 15 bucks. Sprinkle clover around there, and I mean, clover is like the answer all to anything soil related issues. It fixes nitrogen, and it just really helps a lot. And then it also grows year round here in Arizona, so it's always green, which is nice. I'm actually switching out my lawn to clover lawn in order to fix the soil so that later on I can grow fruits and vegetables and stuff outside my house. Also, wildflowers. Wildflowers are great for your garden. They help promote pollinators. That's another thing. So, with the use of pesticides and stuff like that, like, I don't know if you all noticed, but there's not so many bees around anymore. There's not so many butterflies around anymore. There's not so many moths around anymore. And all of those things, like, without bees, we're dead. Like, that's just a fact. If there are no bees, the human race will be gone. Bees are essential to our life. And when you're sitting there and flying over fields with planes and just dumping chemicals on them, it's getting rid of the bees, and you know that's a big issue. So go buy some local wildflower seeds. They also help prevent pests. So yeah, yes.
We gotta wrap up.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. You guys absolutely talk experts.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'll get the link hopefully so we can go